In 1986, there was a disaster at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Due to censorship and secrecy, the evacuation did not begin until 36 hours later. More than 30 years have passed, and it would seem that now everything is more transparent and simpler. However, not so. On August 8th, an explosion occurs at a landfill in the Arkhangelsk region. The local government releases a report of a brief spike in radiation and deletes it, and the Rosatom Corporation only 2 days later confirms that the explosion occurred at a facility with a radiation source and that 5 people died. Again, no one explains the situation to mere mortals, which creates panic. Let's leave it on the conscience of contemporaries, and our business is history. And the whole situation around Sibirdvinsk is another proof that history does not teach people anything. After all, radiation disasters of various scales have happened at military and not so military facilities before. Only a few people know about them, and right now we will try to correct the situation. But to begin with, let us explain that the sharp need for nuclear weapons in general, and nuclear submarines in particular, was faced by the USSR because of constant losses in the international arena. The US clothed the country with military bases, and the Soviets decided to roll in subs that could stealthily move anywhere and constantly keep America in fear. The movement was pioneered by Project 675 boats, referred to in NATO as the Echo II. One of them was K431, a 115-meter-long nuclear-powered baby jet. It was built in less than a year in 1965, and for 20 years it was only used to change missiles and fuel 2 reactors. At the end of the 80s, the question of decommissioning was raised, but the boat, which had traveled 180,000 miles, was kept, and in 1985, once again decided to refuel in a fuel tank. Refueling in Chashma Bay, as is often the case, in violation of all possible safety regulations. Due to the antiquity of the technology, the reactor cover had to be raised for refueling, but not too high, otherwise the boat could skew. To prevent this problem, a beam was simply placed on top of the lid. Due to the special policy of the USSR, the details are still covered by an atmosphere of secrecy. But the most widespread version is that a torpedo boat passed by, and its wave knocked the beam off. The reactor lid rose to the sky, the boat skewed, and an uncontrollable chain reaction started in the reactor. Simply put, being in the open state of the nuclear reactor turned on, and itself provoked a terrible explosion, instantly killed 8 officers and 2 soldiers conscripts, to make you understand the destructiveness of the explosion. 12-ton reactor lid threw back 100 meters as later found out by the golden ring of one of the officers in the epicenter of the radiation level. Well, and as it often happens, the fire was put out by absolutely unprepared people, crews of neighboring boats, harbor workers, and guys passing by. They did not have any special equipment, and meanwhile the reactors and the submarine itself were burning, emitting unreal amounts of radiation into the air. Specialists arrived at the site as much as 3 hours later. And of course, the first thing they did was to set up a total information blockade, and the village of Shkotovo 22 was completely cut off from the outside world. Thanks to the efforts of so-called specialists, the exact scale of the destruction remains a mystery to this day. There are data about a radioactive cloud 3.5 kilometers long, which went flying, and about 290 official victims. However, by the mid-90s, even officially this figure was increased to 950. Many of them were diagnosed with acute radiation sickness, but no one was engaged in accurate counting and establishing the connection between the disease and Chashma. It was necessary to get a special certificate, which was not possible for everyone. That's how we live. K431 is far not the only nuclear violator of ecologists' peace. There was also K278, which sank in the Norwegian Sea due to a fire. According to Norwegian researchers, the radiation level in the waters adjacent to the boat exceeds the norm by 100,000 times. And although at the moment, due to the depth and remoteness of the boat is not dangerous, sooner or later the hull, which serves as a sarcophagus, will collapse. What to do in such a case, it is unclear. For decades, scientists have been making plans to raise it, and fresh data promises extraction in the early 20s. Well, and about the disaster of K-27, and do not want to remember. Having chased the Americans, who successfully rolled out a submarine, C.A. Wolf, with a nuclear reactor on liquid metal, the USSR has piled up its analog. Back in 1959, 2 accidents occurred at once on a bench mock-up of reactor tests for the boat. Even then, the Ka-27 lost its first crew member due to radiation exposure. But who was interested in people? In 1963, the Wunderwaffe, which had not even undergone normal sea trials, was accepted for service, and a year later, it went on a serious campaign. Who would have thought it, but one of the 2 reactors failed. The liquid metal solidified, and the sailors literally used their hands to knock the resulting plug out of the lead. Almost all of them had already caught extreme levels of radiation, but as it was supposed to be in the USSR, nobody was interested in the life and health of ordinary workers. The second trip in 1965 again distinguished itself. The Wright electric motor caught fire. And what do you think? In 1967, the USSR conceived an unprecedented idea: to sail around the globe without going to the surface. It had never happened before, and here it is again. While still in preparation, the reactor broke down and lead poured out. If it weren't for the horror of what was happening, the following words would have been a joke. But no, on May 24, 1968, the K-27, which by that time was firmly nicknamed Nagasaki, was again driven out to sea. It is said that one of the technicians flatly refused to let the submarine go and did not want a sign in the logbook. But who would listen to him? And the Ka-27 sailed out of the base for the last time. The last time because there was a powerful gamma ray burst in the reactor compartment. All 144 sailors received prohibitive doses, and their average life expectancy after the incident was not even 50 years. 9 sailors died in terrible agony in the first few days. The liquidation of the consequences, first of all, was handled by the same crew members, officers, and just personnel who fell into hand. And for the next 10 years, K-27 was still trying to be relaunched. This fact demonstrates in the best possible way the atmosphere prevailing in the Soviet government. By the way, in the end, the same Americans simply curtailed a similar program, citing its complexity and unpredictability. And a good half of our submarine heroes did not receive any benefits from the state. The guys from Ka-27 were discharged from the hospital with the diagnosis of asthenovegetative syndrome because it was forbidden to recognize the facts of accidents. At the time of the Ka-27 submarine sinking, it was still 18 years before Chernobyl, and the Ka-431 explosion was a year away. But later the USSR would claim that it had not yet faced the consequences of nuclear disasters and did not know what to do. But history remembers everything, and if its part was to your liking, don't forget to like it under the video. So the next videos will be even more informative.